Hello, good morning and welcome to Midwest Changemakers. This is a webcast series brought to you by CNU Midwest, CNU Illinois, and CNU Michigan. Our goal with this webcast series is to recognize and learn from groups, individuals, and projects that are committed to a place and creating tangible change for that community. We're really excited to welcome our guests today, Cullen and Jim Walker. Thank you for being here. CNU Midwest is a chapter of the Congress for the New Urbanism, and our mission is to promote urban policy and design that build equity, sustainability, and vibrancy. My name is Jocelyn Gibson. I am the chair of CNU Midwest. My co-host today is Adam Denny. Adam, would you please introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. My name is Adam Denny. I work as a communications lead for a community engagement firm here in Cincinnati called Cohere. I also freelance as a creative strategist, particularly focusing on social impact, equity, and empowerment projects. Very happy to be here. Big shout out to both Cal and Jim for taking time to what I assume is going to be a wonderful conversation.
Yeah, and thank you, Adam, for being here. I just want to remind attendees that there is a Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. In case you have questions, just feel free to ask a question at any time and we'll take them at the end of the session. We're very excited to have two founders of arts organizations that have a broader social mission beyond placemaking. It is our guest today are Cullen of Wave Pool in Cincinnati, Jim Walker of Big Car Collaborative in Indianapolis. So both of your organizations are unique. You have artist space, you house and host artists. You also have a greater role in your community, physically improving the built environment and the quality of life for residents, and also in building community with greater social good. Can you talk about, one, your organization and its mission, and two, what led you to the work that you do? And Cal, we'll start with you first and then Jim.
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much for having us and having this discussion. So Wave Pool, our mission is pairing communities' needs with artists' sense of possibility. And to untangle that a little bit, it basically means that we listen deeply to whatever community we're working with. Usually it's our own neighborhood, but we work with other communities throughout the city and even throughout the world as well sometimes. And then finding ways for artists to respond to those needs and help solve the issues or bring attention to the issues to help create greater equity and inclusion and community building. So this Wave Pool started from a personal need. I'm an artist, my husband's an artist, and we left Cincinnati because we felt like as young artists, we didn't have the stepping stones available here to really get involved and build our career. And at the same time, when we came back, we went to San Francisco for 5 years, and we came back because we saw the opportunity that Cincinnati presented. And I think that there's something about, you know, the grass is always greener and leaving and then realizing how much there actually is here. What you maybe see as a deficit at the beginning, like a vacant building, becomes an asset when you put a new lens on it. And Wave Pool was really born out of this kind of personal need, but also out of a culmination of experiences that I had. When I was in San Francisco, I was working in education at SF MoMA, and the museum closed during my tenure there. And it opened up a whole new world of opportunities for me to really get involved in the city and bringing really well-known artists out into grassroots organizations and bookstores and libraries and all of these other super community engaged places to really have an impact. And at the same time, I was running a small gallery at the back of a bookstore called Adobe Books. And that really was this grassroots organization, community organizing to its core. And so when we started Wave Pool, I was really thinking about how can we merge these two? How can we make a place where a museum meets community organizing? And I think we're always trying to walk that fine line between high-end art that gets the attention of the art world and is collectible and prestigious, that is also very grassroots and community led and empowers residents. So yeah, that's Wave Pool.
Great, thank you for that introduction. Yeah. And Jim, same question.
Sure. So I'm Jim Walker, and I'm one of the co-founders of Big Car Collaborative. We started this organization in 2004 with the same mission that we have now, and that's really to connect people with art as a way to spark creativity in their lives and support the communities that we work in. So we feel like that our mission is really about not expecting everybody to come to us, but to come to them. So we've over time have really been more of an organization that has moved out in ways to people and to figure out ways for people to stumble upon art or to kind of encounter it or encounter creativity and opportunities for creativity that all of us as artists feel like we feel so fortunate that we have that in our lives. So we want to share that with other people. We've also been really focused throughout time, not only about being able to bring creativity to people's lives, but also to use these things and utilize these things as ways to support a better place, identified as what people want to be better, not us choosing what's better for them, but to work together with other people to support better, safer, more comfortable, more respectful, just places that honor people and support people. And so that's what we've been doing. We've moved around a lot, and this started in the very beginning. Some of the co-founders are still involved and still work here. So Shatay Marsh, who's married to me, is one of the folks who co-founded. She still works with us as our director of programs and exhibitions. Andy Fry is our creative director, and he's one of the co-founders. And then we have a board member still, John Clark, who started the organization, and then several others who are still involved in different ways, like Ann Laker. And then we have a whole staff of folks who work within the organization and all team up to do these things. And it's very much how we started as why we're called a collaborative, and we've changed back and forth from collective to collaborative, but we're just a group of artists working together to make these things happen with the community. And we'll go into this a little bit more, but a big part of where we've gone from trying to do things like Cal was saying about if you're here in your community, in your city, and you wish things were a certain way, you don't just need to wish, you just go ahead and start working on it. And when you have a bunch of different people with a lot of different talents and abilities and connections and energy, then you can make that stuff happen together. And so that went from working in a neighborhood, Fountain Square, to moving out to the west side of the town and being in an old tire shop, to landing where we are now, which is down here on the south side, which is the neighborhood where most of us live and have lived for, some of us, for a long time. So that's kind of a quick history.
Yeah, so hearing more about your organizations and really community-driven and focused work, I'm curious to know, in a larger sense, how do you see yourself within your community, and what role do you see as yourself playing as well?
So this one is where it's very central for us to see ourselves as neighbors first, and that's really what we are. So when there's a neighborhood effort that happens, or things that the people in the neighborhood have identified, we're right there with them and we're working with them together. We're not in charge of them, and we're not leading the neighborhood. We're supporting the leadership of the neighborhood. And some of us have been here a long time, and so we can be co-leaders, and then other people are offering support in that way. So our work is really to
Uh-oh. I think we've got a camera freezing situation. Cal, do you want to jump in until we get Jim back?
Yeah, sure. Kind of like exactly what Jim was. Oh, is he back?
And you're 16 out.
Okay, so yeah. Oh, there, you're back, Jim.
I don't know what happened. I think my just
Okay.
jumped off. So
Yeah,
Yes.
you were saying some people you're there with them, and some people are there to offer support. That was the last we heard from you.
Right. And so we, in our neighborhood here, our full-time staff, 4 of the 5 people live in the neighborhood. And then we also, who are full-time, and then we also have a program for affordable housing that has brought artists in to work with us, and they live around here, and we have 16 houses that they live in. So there are already 13 artists in those houses who are working with us too. So we are right here, living here, working together. And so really it's working from within the inside and not doing a top down, but really a bottom up effort together.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, and for us, it's really the same. We're neighbors first. There's really no line, like the line is super blurry between my role as a neighbor or as a curator or as an organization director or an artist. It's just all a fluid job title, I guess, or a role. And for us too, we have 5 staff members, 4 live in the neighborhood of Camp Washington. And they're all super involved residents and neighbors, and listening to our community and being neighbors on the ground is pivotal, really, to our role in the community. So when I think about our roles, really the first role is to be deep listeners, to really create projects that are responsive to our neighborhood needs, to be community advocates, to be artist advocates, and that extends beyond our own neighborhood, but really to the region. I would say it's to advocate for artists being in these community leadership roles. And then also to find creative ways to combine our strengths and to turn neighborhood, maybe perceived deficits, into assets through a combination of the strengths and talents that are already present in the neighborhood.
Right. And full disclosure, I live in the neighborhood where your organization operates for attendees, and I definitely feel that role, that there's definitely a, you're so entrenched in the community, and looking at what we have here, our assets and our strengths, and working with us and all the other residents here. So
glad you're a neighbor, Jocelyn.
Yeah, and thank you for all that you do here. So my next question is for Jim. Jim, you have integrated tactical urbanism and public space revitalization into your work. Can you explain tactical urbanism and how you've implemented it, and what role you think it has played in creating change in Indianapolis?
Yeah, I'm gonna share. Can you make it so I can share my screen?
Oh,
I can talk first, but I want to show this chart. So the tactical urbanism is central to kind of the philosophy that we have in our work, which is testing ideas, not being locked into something. Really, we started out as an organization that was very much informed by surrealism and by the idea of art that comes from chance and from, tapping into a part of yourself that isn't your conscious self. And I think tactical urbanism you might not think of it as having a lot to do with surrealism and chance, but what it does do is, it, in a similar way, is it allows you to collaborate with the world and just sort of see what happens. So these are tests. So everything we do, we think of it as a test or as an attempt to try to figure out what's going to work best. So these tests, and that's what tactical urbanism is typically about. The tactics are to get yourself to a place where some long-term permanent change can happen, but you don't just wait until that comes. You go out and you try things out and you test these ideas. So you go and you see what you can do with what you have at your disposal. So this chart, it sort of shows how we do this work, and this work is always a circle. So we're not in a linear kind of setup. We're sort of circling around these ideas of how to identify the improvements that need to happen, things that are really great ideas that have risen up through engagement with the community, through planning together, and through testing, and then celebrating along the way each time you have these successes. So then some of that might then be maintained and become something that's functioning like a plateau where you're still going along, but you're always sort of circling around and coming back and evaluating your work and tracking and getting feedback from the folks you're working with and seeing how that goes. And so this is how any little project sort of works in the same circle. It could be trying to do some of the work we've done over here on the main busy street nearby to slow it down and make it safer for our neighbors to get back and forth across the street, because that's a street that divides people. And so we've done things along that street to make it feel safer, be safer, slow traffic down, trying to do that, to larger things like how to take a public space like Monument Circle in the center of downtown and actually see if it can be a place for creativity and a place for people to gather and a place for people to be comfortable and test out those kind of ideas, with the idea being that somebody would come along someday with a lot more money and make a permanent larger change that's already been tested with paint and cones and cheap stuff. So you can, this lighter, quicker, cheaper, which comes from Project for Public Spaces, is a strategy for making things happen quickly, but still with thought, and after you've done engagement to make sure you're not going in and doing some kind of drop-in intervention in a community where you don't know what you're doing, they don't know who you are, they don't want you there. You don't want to do that kind of stuff.
Thank you for sharing that, and yeah, giving that good analysis. So my next question is for Cal. Some of your work at Wavepool is really focused and centered around food, particularly the power that comes when we bring community and food and the table all together. I'm specifically speaking to the Welcome Table and Cincinnati Table projects that you do. I was wondering if you can tell us a little bit about the genesis of these projects and the kinds of community connections that are being formed through them. You're on mute. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, so I mean, to me, food is the ultimate uniter, right? Like food can really break down social barriers, get people to loosen up and talk and feel more at ease. And there's nothing like a good meal to connect people. And I've used it in my own art practice for many years. And when we started the Welcome Project with a group of women refugees, it really started as art classes, and then they started selling their work and being empowered to teach classes in their expertise areas. But it quickly expanded to a realization that they also have these amazing home recipes that tell their story. They tell their story of immigration. They tell their story of displacement, diaspora, and they tell their history. And it was a way for them to share these stories and really to feed our neighborhood and feed our city, which helped empower and integrate them and make them feel valued. And so we started doing Cincinnati's Table, started out as something else, but it became Cincinnati's Table quickly. And I don't know how many dinners we've done so far, but it's typically a monthly community dinner where we collaborate with a community organization. We do them all over the city, and an artist. And typically the dinners are centered around a theme, and we tackle big issues using the art and the food to share. And it's been incredible. Some of the home chefs have become regular leaders and teachers at the Welcome Project, and really become part of our ongoing community. And we've started, because of the pandemic, things have shifted quite a bit because we're not able to sit around a table any longer, at least not now. So we started doing the grocery and meal delivery program. Food became much more of a basic need and less of a community connector. And so turned Welcome into a food pantry, started a frozen food line, which was able to support some of these chefs during this time and get their stories and food out into the public that way. Online cooking classes, and then we're doing takeout dinners through the welcome window now. And now we have the free fridge, which is a whole nother thing. So food, I think, has just become an integral part of Wavepool and what we can offer. And it's also a way for us to, like, as Jim was saying earlier, it's not expecting people to come to the art, but for art to come to them. So when we were doing the grocery delivery, art was always part of that. We think of art as a necessity, just like food, but we realize not everyone sees it that way. So, but the more we can put food and art together as a response to a need, I think it'll really reinforce this to the community, that both of these things serve necessary purposes. So yeah.
Great, thank you, Cal. You both have talked about engagement as we've kind of gone through these other questions. Engagement in our field, a lot of the people who will be on this call, engagement is something we're really looking at critically, because the ways that we've always done it have been very formulaic, very come to us, as the kind of the opposite of what you all are trying to do. So in our field, we're really kind of looking in the mirror and trying to do it better. And so this is definitely something where we could learn from both of you. So, sometimes it's just checking a box in certain community planning practices. Did you get community engagement? It becomes an addendum to, policy. So I just would like to know more about the ways that you guys have engaged communities, any methods that you've used in your creative placemaking processes. Cal, since we'll start with you.
Sure. Yeah, as I think I said earlier, like this deep listening process and this engagement, it's definitely not a check the box for us. It's just ingrained in everything we do. And I think one of the first projects Wavepool did was this Lollipopulous, where we put like boxes that said, what can art do for you? And people took a lollipop and filled out a form, just expressing what they'd like to see in the neighborhood, what are the best things, the worst things. It's just constant. And that was much more of a straightforward survey. Since then, we've done things like Hot Dog for Your Thoughts, where we just have a grill out on the corner and exchange hot dogs for people's ideas and just listening. It's just a lot of intentional listening and data collection. I call it creative placemaking data collection, right? Like just, we do this both intentionally with projects like the Lollipopulous, and we had a chair project, and the staycation was a series of programs, but we also do this just by being ourselves in the neighborhood and going to the council meetings and having residents that work here and walking our dog and running into people, right? Like it just becomes an ongoing conversation with the neighborhood. So I think that's, there's lots of creative way and fun ways to continue that conversation with residents. But what I've learned is that because it's not just a check the box, you've gotten community engagement, the residents they're so much more supportive when a project does come to fruition. They see direct correlation, like, oh yeah, like I said that we need to have a market in the neighborhood like 3 years ago, and here it is, right? Like, and I think that builds this level of community trust and just, makes them feel really good about where they live and makes us better neighbors.
That's great. Thank you for those insights. And Jim, the same question to you.
Sure. There's a lot of things that we've done over time that are kind of similar to typical planning processes, having meetings, using sticky notes and surveys. But I really agree with Cal that the time spent talking with people, and also just the emphasis in our case, and we're fortunate to be able to do this, but to have more people who are engaged with the community and artists live in and have them live in our neighborhood and be more of us who are having these conversations while they're out walking their dog or just walking down the street. I think that's been very beneficial. I think one of the things we learned when we were doing this, the biggest placemaking project we ever did was down at Monument Circle. And when we were doing that, the city was thinking about changing the way that it works for cars and for people, pedestrian zone versus the driving zone. And what we really saw in it, and you've seen other people who think this way too, people like Jan Gale and stuff, where you can't plan from above, you have to plan from that being on the ground. And I think that's been something that engagement is not only talking to people and getting feedback, but it's also being right there to engage with people who are there. So if you try to do a neighborhood meeting and you invite people to come and talk to you, they might not be the same people who are using the park where you want to do this work. So just be in the park and talk to people as they come by and observe what's going on and what's not working, what is working by being in the park. And you know, one of the things I think sometimes is a challenge for people who program public spaces, including parks, is they aren't outside of their office in the park kind of looking around. And I think that's a very important corollary to any kind of work in a neighborhood. If you're inside somewhere, or you're planning from above, or planning on paper, or planning in your computer, or planning in meetings, you're missing out on where all the action is, which is out in the world where things are really happening. And so I think that's been really important for us to just be out there and have more help. You know, we have lots of support from the neighborhood itself and from the neighbors who we've been able to be fortunate enough to even bring into vacant houses and have them be, by design, engaged in the neighborhood. So that's part of how they get a more affordable home, is by committing to this kind of engagement with their community and being part of that. So, you know, if you had the resources to do it, I think every architect, landscape architect and planner should just have an outdoor, when the weather's nice, an outdoor office where they just sit if they're working on an outdoor space, or an indoor office if they're working, say, on a city market project. Don't do that from your office somewhere else. Do that from inside the city market. Just sit there, spend some time there, and then you'll know a lot more about it. And you can talk to people who walk by you and you can say, hey, what do you think about this? Versus who you might end up with coming to a meeting.
I've heard both of you mention this idea of intention and response to needs with the projects that you do, with how your organizations are structured. You know, one huge concern for us in this nation is systemic racism and the real impacts, everyday impacts that it has on communities of color. I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit to how your organizations are addressing racial equity, perhaps through programming, funding, and sorts like that. Cal, we can start with you if you like.
Sure. So I'll start with maybe our most public-facing program, which is our exhibitions. It's what's in our storefront, and what most people still think of us as a gallery, even though we do a lot more. And our exhibitions program, like all of the rest of our programs, are responsive to communities' needs. And so our exhibitions over the past year, several of them have been about systemic racism, about colonialism. The current show up now, called Exposing the Limits, is all completely artists of color speaking about their own personal experiences. And so that's one way, is to really intentionally make our exhibitions and the artists that we support through that program responsive to and highlighting and supporting those artists. But there's other creative placemaking projects that we're working on as well, and have done in the past. We work pretty intentionally with some community partners. A few years ago, we did a project called Spa Salon, which was addressing infant mortality in the North Fairmont area, specifically with women of color. And that, again, it was a nail painting salon, listening to the residents and having pretty intentional and hard conversations about reproductive health. And right now, as you know, Adam, we've worked with Broken into Beautiful, which is a mostly women of color, women's empowerment group. Wavepool's worked with them for 2.5 years, and we're now working on a stigma reduction program with them that empowers some of these women to tell their story and to mentor others. So for us, it's about collaborating. Like we're not a top-down organization. These are all collaborative projects where we're looking to empower, uplift, put in leadership positions these people that are most impacted. And organizationally, we're always looking to expand our leadership positions to be more people of color. And we still have a lot of work to do in that area. I think right now on our board, we've got 30% are people of color, and I'd like to get over 50, but so there's always more work to be done. And it's something that I think we just constantly have to be addressing and keeping at the forefront.
So central to our work has always been the idea of equity and inclusion, and making sure that people who are underrepresented are getting their opportunity, or we're working with them to create opportunities for that to happen. And you know, that for us, the balance is between exhibitions and art. And you know, our curator Shantae Marsh is a woman of color, and we have also a big part of our work is our radio station, which is WQRT, and you can find it at wqrt.org. And that's been a great thing for us to do throughout, because it can reach our city even during the pandemic. And that's led by Sean Smith, Oreo Jones, who's an artist of color and just an amazing guy. And both of those two really bring so much energy to what we do, and great ideas and perspective, and work together with the rest of us to be thoughtful, to be making sure that we're responding to what's going on in the world. So Shantae has recently, you know, had these rapid response exhibits that are addressing what's going on with immigration and with the things that were happening with the border wall, and including artists like Laura Ortiz Vega, who was doing a project about the border wall when we had Mike Pence and Trump like here in town around us at the same time that that exhibit opened. And so these are just ways that we're being thoughtful on the art side. And then on the community side, the whole Artists in Public Life residency program is by design a way to fight the segregation that has really done so much damage to our city, and to think about how a small community that we can help be part of reimagining, from taking vacant houses and having these be places where artists live, and a block can become a representation of what our city should be more like, which is a city where you have all kinds of people living together in the same place, sharing the same space, working together, and bringing their different perspectives and backgrounds to that work. The other thing and then you can think about that as a test and as an experiment in how things might be able to work when you think about a bigger picture approach that could happen in a city. And I think Cincinnati is very similar to Indianapolis in this way. It's been a place where everything is divided up. So you work over here, you live over here, you shop over here, and white people do it here, and other people people of color do it here. And it's been intentionally pulled apart. And that was just part of what happened with urban renewal, suburbanization of our cities. And it left a lot of opportunity for people to think differently about that now. So, you know, it did a lot of damage, but there's a way you can come back to these problems and not let that continue to be like that anymore, and not live like that. And we didn't want our kids to grow up in that kind of place. And so, you know, everybody's working to not have that be the case.
And I think, you know, this conversation kind of goes to another question that I had on my mind. I've heard you both speak of creative placemaking. sometimes placemaking is synonymous to place taking, especially when it comes to the real issue of displacement vis-a-vis revitalization. What I find amazing about both your orgs is that your goal is not to create new neighborhoods, but to bring impact to long-term communities in your area. I was wondering if you could speak a little more to how you see the role of creative placemaking and how that can be a force to combat forms of place taking.
Who should start? You want me to? I'll start. Yeah, so I feel like, especially when you're an artist, if you're not working to combat gentrification, then you are working for it, right? I mean, we have a tendency, a really amazing tendency to make things beautiful and make things attractive, and then next thing you know, your rent's too high and you get kicked out. It happened to me in the Mission District of San Francisco. I've seen it happen again and again and again. And so I think when we moved to Camp Washington, we were very intentional. We still are, and adamant about finding ways that we can continue to make this place affordable for all. To keep it diverse, to keep the people who are here and have been here for longer, and to make the place better for those that live here, but not inviting to big developers or maybe large movements that may push others out. So, you know, we've done a few things to help with this. When we purchased the building for the Welcome Project, part of it was because we wanted space for the women of the Welcome Project, but it was also because there's 8 apartments above, and we knew that, well, at least we'll have those 8 apartments. And, you know, ideally we'd be able to secure more affordable housing in the neighborhood. But I think it all goes back to like listening to the residents, finding ways to make sure that the residents are involved in the community council meetings, that they know about developments that are happening. We recently worked with Action Tank, which is a local new nonprofit that's working on civic engagement to create a CBA, Community Benefits Agreement toolkit. We worked with the artist Courtney Cooper to like make this little map that residents can walk through on how to make a CBA that's beneficial for all when a developer does move into the neighborhood. So, you know, we're doing what we can, and so far it's been okay. We haven't seen people getting kicked out. There's also a ton of vacancy in Camp Washington, so I think that there's plenty of room to grow here without dealing with the tensions that might be present in other neighborhoods. But it's something we always have to be vigilant about.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for responding. Jim, same question to you.
Yes, a lot of our work here is really about placekeeping, and some of that is focused on ownership of property. And I think that's been something we figured out. I know that's been something we figured out over time, that when we don't own that, and when a developer owns that, and when people who are profit driven, which isn't only for profits, sometimes nonprofits have to have a model, and a lot of times this is the case with community development corporations, where they have to make money off of real estate or homes and such to do the next project that they do. And that's not there's no blame in that, but if you're in that kind of cycle, affordability is very difficult to maintain. And a lot of times affordable housing is very short term, so that you can get an affordable house, like in the neighborhood just north of us here where we used to live, Fountain Square. There were a ton of affordable houses, but and a lot of affordable housing projects for rental homes and apartments, but they were only 10 years, 20 years. And that seems like a long time, but it goes by quick. And then all of that went away at once. So the whole neighborhood went from having a lot of affordable housing to having just about none. And then it turned into this place that's very expensive and exclusive. So we've been focusing on making sure that not only are we maintaining the affordable housing long-term, but also making sure that there's co-ownership with the artists, so they get something out of that ownership. So we want to do that. We want to provide that for other people, because the opportunity for wealth building and for passing on wealth to future generations is tied into owning your own property so often. And so that's very important to us. The other thing is, I think placemaking, when it is generally a good idea if it has the right goals in mind. And that is really about what happens in places, not what that place is going to turn into in terms of a monetary value. So doing placemaking for somebody who's just trying to make money off of that place is not something that we're interested in as an exclusive aspect of it. We know that people who own property need to have tenants rent their space. They need to make it a nice place that people want to visit. If they have a restaurant there, they want to make it comfortable and nice for the people who go to the restaurant. But the other thing is, it needs to be a place where people can, for us, can make art, can be creative, can connect with each other, can socialize, can rebuild a lot of times connections between each other that are being lost by the division that we're contending with in our country, and with the whole gap in social skills and comfort in socializing with each other when you spend so much time separate from each other, which is one of the things that I'm concerned about, that social distancing is going to create even more of a problem for that. So good placemaking doesn't take it away from somebody to make it more valuable for somebody else, and where they get nothing out of that. What it does is it makes the place more valuable for the people who are there and for the people who can come there too. So it's great. You don't want to move people out and then bring new people in. You want to keep the people who are there, and you want to bring more people in to make that place more successful, especially if it's a place that has businesses. You know, if you have a restaurant or coffee shop in a neighborhood, you want more people there because your business is going to succeed. And businesses just can't make it, and neighborhoods really can't make it when they're they're vacant, or there's so little density of people there to support that place. And so, but good placemaking keeps, and it creates density, and it brings more people in, and then that energy returns back to the people who are there at the beginning.
And especially to your last couple points, we especially saw that kind of rhetoric of keeping low density and keeping things exclusive over the last 4 years. And I was just reading the incoming administration's new housing plan, and it looks like there's going to be a lot more tools moving forward to to combat those things. So that's positive. And I think hopefully some innovative policy can exist on that front, because I don't think we've really found any yet. In a larger sense. But I kind of want to move back into some process questions with regards to your programming. And something that both Adam and I noticed is when you go into your website, the amount of projects and sort of just the sheer innovation that you got, and just all the different things that you're doing. And we just kind of wondered about your process when you're deciding on new initiatives, and if that's really sort of more of an evolutionary process in sort of seeing a problem and dealing with it, or if you kind of have an idea and then there's an execution. And we were just kind of wondering if there's a specific process that leads you to all the amazing programming that both of your organizations are doing. And Jim, I'll start with you.
Okay, great. I'm going to share this little chart that we have. So we like to have these different flow charts that kind of help us make sense of the surreal and crazy stuff that kind of seems like it's all over the place. But what we're really looking at is how, when an idea comes, and we have our full-time staff, Carly Foreman, Elizabeth Nash, Sean, Chate, and I work with Andy Fry and Jason Gray and Connor Green and our whole team of the APLR artists, and what we do, and Eduardo Luna and all these other folks. And what we do is these things come and people bring these ideas, and then we sort of together think through what makes sense for us to do. And the process that we use to kind of decide that is sort of looking at what are our bigger objectives, what are the issues that we're looking at in the city that we think that we can address through arts approaches, through the things that we can do as artists, and the things that we can do as designers, and the things that we can do as neighbors. And then we plug that into these different ways that our programming can include people, can innovate, can be meaningful, can be comfortable, can be respectful to people. And then we know what we're striving for on the outcome end is just to create these, to help create these places and these ways of life being that lead to better connected people, that lead to successful just individual success, but also broader success for the community. So we look at ways that small things can happen that might support a couple people at a time, and including people within our own team, and then also ways that are larger that can come out of that work. So there are all kinds of things that come to us and all kinds of opportunities, and we have to look at them and say, how many of these outcomes and how many of these issues are being addressed by these opportunities? And the more that we can kind of accomplish multiple things with a project, the more interested we are typically in doing those. But sometimes it's really just focused on one important thing. And so it doesn't always have to be that every single thing does all of this, but that's a way for us to approach it, and to think about also what we can do to, when we can help initiate things and support other people in what they're doing. So we don't have to try to own all the stuff. And so many of our things, like Cal's saying, were collaborative projects versus things that we just did on our own. And we're so happy when that stuff goes on and other people continue that work with us not even needing to be involved anymore.
Oh, I'm muted. I was just saying that's a great visualization. And Cal, the same question to you.
Yeah, so for us, we kind of have I have a Venn diagram, but I'm not going to share, that basically combines experimental art, connects community, and creates change, right? And like the ideal wave pool program would do all three of those things. And there's different topics that can be addressed, like whether it's the health of our residents or food access or education. But whatever the ideal project, whatever the topic is, it is able to support artists, advocate for artists, connect community, and create change. We started as an artist project, right? Like we started as, because we started as a personal need for a way for artists to thrive in the city. It really grew organically from that. So like just by being residents here, whether artists or not, we maybe started with studio spaces and a wood shop because that's what artists need. But then it very quickly grew into, well, we also need affordable housing. We need to have food access. We need all these things. And so it became organic just by being residents here and listening. And I would say it is hard to like, I would say people that maybe look at the website or hear about the kind of disparate projects that we do, they maybe have a hard time wrapping their head around like what wave pool is because there are so many different things. But it's always because they're community driven, right? Like we start with the community and what the need is. And then either an artist has an idea to address the need, or we work with the community further and then curate or tap an artist that would be a good fit to work on that project. So I hope that answers your question. It's an organic, evolving process.
Yeah, and it does. And even though people might look at both your websites, it sounds like you both have like a really strong theoretical foundation against the things you decide to take on and how they kind of come to your table. So
yeah, and it can be difficult, like what Jim was saying, to kind of decide whether a project is a yay or nay on if we can invest the time, energy, and money to make it happen. But I think if it meets all of our goals, then we try and make it work. So
yeah, well, great. And our last question, we've got time for one more question. I just want to remind the attendees to feel free to ask a question in the Q&A. There's a Q&A box at the bottom, so feel free to type in a question if you have one. Our last question, so in a hypothetical world where an administration comes in and creates a huge huge grant for place-based, community-focused arts organizations. You have sort of unlimited funds. You can hire staff. What is there sort of a project or something you'd have in mind that you would do? Is there sort of like that sort of wish list project that you would do if you had that kind of funding or resources?
Only one?
I
have a whole list.
Multiple, yeah. Like, feel free to run with this one.
Yeah, so I think about the biggest burdens for creatives in our city, and just for urban living in general. And so I think about healthcare, like it is on my, I'm really trying to figure out how we can make affordable healthcare for all creative gig workers in Cincinnati. And then affordable housing is always something that needs to be tackled. So maybe we could do like what Jim has done and buy a block of houses and have these. I've been working with Co-op Cincy with they have like a co-op affordable housing option with renters equity, which is really appealing to me. So I'd love to try that out. And then I would like to support the hiring of an artist in all sectors of government, maybe at all major businesses and corporations in the region, to assist in decision-making and creative problem solving within all of these corporate and governmental sectors of the city. Just finding ways for artists to be valued for their creative problem solving skills and to really become integral to any process that affects citizens.
Yeah, and I think some of the people that engage with our organizations can be fairly technical in the makeup of what they do. But just to sort of further explain, what do you think that artists sort of bring to that process that might be absent?
I think they bring like a social justice lens, honestly, because they are often coming from these backgrounds where they're used to making ends meet and like used to being scrappy and finding ways to make things work. So I feel like artists, at least the ones that I like to work with, have this kind of can-do optimism about making something out of nothing. And a lot of times working in other sectors, especially the government, I find that there's always this barrier about funding, like it's going to take X number of dollars. And I think that it doesn't always have to be the case. I think you can do a lot with a little. So I think artists bring that lens to it, and just about combining things that you already have, this like social collage aspect. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's good for us to hear that perspective. I think definitely in my field, for sure, in our field, of people on the call. So, and Jim, the same question for you.
There's a big thing that there's been some talk about it here, and so the highways that come through the middle of our city just destroy it basically, and destroy the connectivity of it, and kind of circle the downtown. So there's 70 and 65, and one of the things that has been happening is that a lot of planners are involved in this, artists, community leaders, and reimagining what was a terrible plan for how to fix some of that through our city. And if let's say that the government was just going to give us billions of dollars, I think it would take capping all that stuff and reconnecting our neighborhood. Where I'm sitting right now, I can see where the highway divides the other side of our neighborhood from this side. And it just ripped right through there. And when you can find old photos that they took out of airplanes, it just looked like World War II. And they just came through and just razed all these houses. And they did it through the south side, through the west side, through neighborhoods that were predominantly African-American neighborhoods, and then other lower income neighborhoods where they could just go right through and nobody would put up much of a fight because they didn't know what was going on or what was about to happen. And so what that could be then is a place to build both green spaces, but also there's a lot of edge on those highway things where you could put housing. So you could put more housing in a neighborhood like this one that is close to Fountain Square, which is the very gentrified area. And that's where the highway goes through there too. So you could open up this new space where you could go back in, put a lot of affordable housing, have a lot of opportunities for art and culture, and really make an area that is a complete, like the talk about 15-minute cities or 5-minute cities or whatever, where you can walk to the grocery store, you can walk to the park, you can walk to school. What is always going to keep that from happening around here in a safe way, it's these highways, because you can't go very far until you run into them. And that's the same in Houston, the same in Cincinnati, the same everywhere. You can't go very far until you come to this barrier, which they just ripped through the city to make it so you can get through it really fast, with no thought about everybody who lives there and what it did. And what it also did, making it so easy to live further and further away from where you work and from where you shop and from where you go to hang out and where you go to the art museums or where you go to see art. Put people in there, those places, and make the land less scarce. That's what I would do. If I had all that money, it would just take all that. If you look above a city and you see all that expansive space being given over to cars and highways, and say, how about we give that back to people living there, people doing things, parks. Like it has happened in other cities and it's happening in other places. And you go there, like you go to Dallas, and they did that in downtown Dallas, and you're like, I can't imagine how terrible this would have been the way it was before, because it would have just been so awful. And it makes it so much difference. And it would just employ a lot of people. It would help businesses thrive. It would bring back density. It would just be a game changer for every city, but for ours for sure.
Yeah. And in response to your sort of tactical urbanism conversation, probably transportation infrastructure is the most laborious to kind of create change and kind of rationale and methodology for sure. Yeah. So we're getting up to the top of the hour. We did have a question about this presentation being available. It will be available on YouTube, on CNU Midwest's YouTube page. So if you want to share it afterwards, you can find it there. We want to thank both of our guests today. You guys have been awesome. You guys are doing such amazing work, and we really appreciate you guys taking the time to be here with us today. I also want to thank Adam Denny, creative strategist with Cohere, for being our co-host today. Adam, we really appreciate you taking the time. So with that, I think we will close. If there are no more questions asked in the Q&A, we will wrap up. But thanks for everyone for sharing their Friday with us. And if you'd like to learn more about any of our guests, the Big Car Collaborative online and Wavepool online and CNU Midwest, you can find us there. All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.